What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who classic review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the third Doctor Jon Pertwee story, Doctor Who and the Silurians. This is the second story from season 7, which is Jon Pertwee's first season as the third Doctor. And it's an episode that I hadn't seen previously to watching this the other day, so I was definitely excited because I'd heard pretty good things about and the Silurians. First of all, a pretty strange name, with having it and the Silurians. I think it was supposed to be just the Silurians, but I don't know, there was some mix-up, something went wrong, and it's now Doctor Who and the Silurians, so a bit of a weird name, but I was definitely excited to watch this. So anyway, let's have a look at the back of the DVD. This is Doctor Who and the Silurians by Malcolm Hulke. Exiled to Earth and now working for UNIT as their scientific advisor, the Doctor is summoned to an underground research centre at Wenley Moor to investigate a series of inexplicable power losses. Initially suspecting sabotage, he soon discovers that the nearby cave system conceals a colony of an ancient reptilian race called the Silurians. Awakening from a hibernation which has lasted millions of years, they are now intent on reclaiming the Earth from mankind. So quite an interesting story. If you've seen the new series 5 episode, 2-part episode, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, you'll know that it's pretty much the same plot from that. I actually didn't mind that story. I thought it was pretty good, and I still do quite like it, but it definitely does take away from it a bit when you do realize how much of that is just pretty much a direct rip-off of this story. There's so many similarities through it, which I will be going through as we go through this review, but that story has a lot of similarities to this. But anyway, let's start off with this review with the cast. Alright, so to start with, we have of course got Jon Pertwee as the third Doctor. I really like Jon Pertwee. He's one of my favourite classic Doctors at this current point in time, and probably always will be. I just really like him. He's one of the Doctors that one of the earliest memories I have of a classic Doctor, him and the third Doctor, really, the fourth Doctor, sorry. I really like Jon Pertwee. This is obviously his second ever episode, and I think he's really quite good in this one. I don't think he's quite up to his self in this season. I don't know, really. He's a little bit different in this season, He's got the shorter hair than he kind of would, later on in series. I think it's really from season 9 onwards. He gets the kind of bigger, longer hair. And that's kind of how you know Jon Pertwee. So in this story, he's got a bit shorter hair, and I don't know, maybe he acts a little bit different, but I think altogether, Jon Pertwee is amazing, and he's a great Doctor. We then have the companion in the form of Liz Shaw, played by Carolyn John. I think Carolyn John's pretty good. Liz Shaw is a character who we sadly only got to see for 4 episodes. She was only in 4 stories, should I say. She was only in the 4 stories from season 7. She was literally in this season, and that was it. We got her in this, Spearhead from Space, Inferno, and Ambassadors of Death. So we don't actually get to see too much of Liz Shaw throughout Doctor Who. However, I think she's pretty good. I think one of the main reasons why she was kind of, she did eventually, say, well, she didn't, but the writers or whatever said, oh, we're going to get rid of Liz Shaw, was because she is a bit too, she's science, she's part of UNIT, she's pretty intelligent, she's kind of almost a match for the Doctor in some ways, so it's like they wanted somebody not quite as smart and stuff, but I think it's definitely a nice little change of companion, and Liz Shaw, I think all round is pretty good. Only other character I really want to talk about is Nicholas Courtney as Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. I really do love the Brigadier. I think he's a great character. Nicholas Courtney plays him really, really well in this story as well. You get those moments where, and the Brigadier does it a lot, where he just doesn't agree with what the Doctor's saying at all. He just does not give a crap. And he's like, totally going against what the Doctor says because he thinks he can do it a better way. And I just really like that about the Brigadier. I think he's a really interesting character. It's cool to see him in this one. Alright, so now let's get on to some good things about this episode, starting off with the introduction to the Doctor's car, Bessie. Yeah, we see Bessie in this story for the first time, and that's just a nice little thing. We get to see the Doctor driving her around a little bit. At the start, we see him fixing her because she's all battered up, and he's just got Bessie, and it's a bit of a lead-in from Spearhead from Space when I believe he did drive a car in that episode similar to Bessie, and at the end he said, I want one of those cars. So Brigadier got him one, and she introduced in this episode. So really cool to see Bessie here, a very, very quintessential part of the third Doctor. The Doctor and UNIT investigating and searching the caves, I thought was quite an interesting little thing when they're going through the caves. That was just a nice little scene there at the start of, I don't know, was it part 1, part 2? I can't really remember, but that was just a nice little adventurous sort of scene there. The Doctor and Liz sneaking around the Silurians' base was very, very fun. We're skipping quite a few episodes ahead here. This is when they were going through the Silurian base, sneaking around. I thought it was very well directed, very well shot, and altogether just, for Classic Who, when Classic Who looks bad, it looks quite bad, but when it looks good, it actually looks really good, because for the time you think, you know what, for the 1970s or whenever it was when, this specific episode that we're speaking of was recorded, you think, that actually looks really, really good for the time when you do compare it to some of the really bad stuff. So, there was definitely some good shots and good direction while they were sneaking around at the base. The fact that the Silurians aren't invading and are actually the primitive Earth beings is interesting and different. So we're so used to aliens and, other creatures and crazy things like that invading the Earth. It happens all the time in Doctor Who, it's such a cliche. However, with this one, it's not really the case, because the Silurians, they were actually here before the humans. I think they explained something about, I didn't quite 100% get it. I have only seen this episode once, so I didn't really take everything in. It's also 7 parts long, so it's a bit long in my opinion, which we will get to, but it's a bit hard to get everything in, take everything in the first time, but I'm fairly sure they mentioned something about the Silurians were supposed to be wiped out by something, but I don't know what it was, but there was something that stopped the thing. The reason why they were wiped out was stopped somehow, so it meant they still survived. And that's why we get this issue, where they come out of the ground, they find out there's humans above them that have built whole civilizations. And I thought that was just so cool, because the Silurians, this is their planet. They were here before any of the humans, and I think that's just a really, really interesting concept that doesn't really you can't really do it more than once or twice. It's not something you can do over and over again. They basically did it again with the Hungry Earth and Cold Blood in Series 5, but I think it's just nice to have this sort of thing instead of just your standard Earth invasion. The feud between the Silurian leader and the wannabe leader, I thought was interesting. It was nice. It's always nice to have some conflict inside. When we get a bit of backstory, not really backstory, but we get a bit of information on the enemy and what's going on with them. And we really get that here, because the leader is wanting... Well, the Doctor comes to the Silurian leader and says, we can make peace, we can live, the humans and the Silurians can live together, and it's all good. It will all be fine. And the Silurian leader kind of goes, you know what, I reckon that could work. But then this other wannabe leader, who's a little bit nuts, I will say, he says, nope, we can't be doing that, and he kind of takes in all the other Silurians. They end up killing the leader and kind of taking over for themselves, and that ends up ending up in their downfall. But I thought it was just really nice to have a little bit of something else going on, a bit of feud between the enemies as well, because it really does add a little bit to the story. Like I said before, I can see where the Hungry Earth and Cold Blood took inspiration. Now I've put this down as a good thing, because for this story, it's a good thing. Now if I was doing a review of the Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, this could maybe be put in a negative. I don't know if it was really a negative. Taking inspiration is one thing, but I think the Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, it did a bit more than that. It kind of just ripped off the idea. It was basically the exact same thing. It's almost like it was a remake, to be honest. If they didn't have little nods here and there in that episode, the Doctor saying, oh yeah, this once happened before, we tried to do this, we tried to figure it out once before. If we didn't have nods like that, I honestly would have thought that Series 5 episode was a remake, because it's the same thing again. We find out that there's Silurians living under the ground. The humans don't know about it. The Silurians, I don't know, they don't know about it or something. All this shit happens. People get captured. They come to an agreement and they're like, yeah, this can work. Then something goes wrong with one of the Silurians. Once again, didn't even think about that. One of the Silurians decides, no, I'm not having this. We've got to kill the humans. We got all that shit happening, and then it all goes wrong. It's basically the same plot, which I'm going to give it to this story. It must be a bloody good story if they want to pretty much rip it off again. God knows how many years, what was this, 1970, 80, 90, 40 years down the line, they want to rip it off again. Must be a pretty good story, but it's a good thing for this story, not such a good thing for the kind of Hungry Earth Cold Blood story in Series 5. And then finally, a pretty exciting ending where Oh god, what happens in the end again? I haven't actually written it down. Some stuff happens at the end. Oh, that's it, the whole reactory thing. And they all blow up, but they manage to get away, and the Silurians blow up and stuff. Yeah, just a pretty exciting ending. Now just to go on with a couple of bad things. First of all, the monster looks very dated. We have this monster other than the Silurian, which we kind of get introduced to in the first episode, and it pops up here and there, but it's not really a massive part of the story. It kind of leads us into the Silurians. You know, we start off with this big monster, and then we're like, you know, there's this big monster, but it must be being controlled by something else. We find out that that is the Silurians, but yeah, this monster looks really dated. I mean, I don't think the Silurians look great, but for the time, I think they look decent. However, this monster, I think even for the time, or maybe it just does look dated. This was 1970, probably 69 when it was recorded. And it does look rather dated. We don't probably see a Silurian until part 3's cliffhanger. Yeah, a bit of a long wait to see a Silurian. I mean, we get glimpses of it in part 1. Part 2, we get quite a lot of kind of POV shots with the Silurian that was wounded, but we don't actually properly see a Silurian standing up right there in front of our eyes until the end of part 3, which for me is a little bit too long. What else? It does feel fairly slow at times. This is just classic Doctor Who in a nutshell, but this is a 7-part story, and I personally think that anything over 4 parts can be a bit long. I think 4 parts is the perfect length for a classic story. 6 parts can work sometimes, but can drag. However, 7 parts, I think for this story, it's not too bad, but it could have definitely at least been a 6-parter, I think. And then finally, the new Silurian leader overacts a bit in my opinion. Yeah, when the new Silurian leader takes over, the actor kind of moves his head around a bit too much and jigs around. It looks a bit ridiculous. I think that Silurian was supposed to be kind of a little bit crazy and ridiculous. That's what they were going for. But at times, it does look a bit silly. Anyway, Doctor Who and the Silurians, a story that I actually really quite enjoyed. I was struggling on what to rate this story because I was comparing it because I've actually got a list of all the stories I've reviewed so far and their rankings, and I've been kind of I've been ranking them together with their scores, and I decided to go, at least for the current point in time, I'm going to give Doctor Who and the Silurians a 9 out of 10. I was balancing between an 8.5 and a 9. I see a lot of people give it a 10. I think it's a bit too long and drawn out, and a few things that I'm not a big fan of to give it a 10, but I think all in all it's pretty enjoyable, and for the second episode of Jon Pertwee's run, I think it's definitely good, and I think a 9's a deserving score. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.